And let me convene the Thursday, September 29th, 2022 meeting of the advisory committee. And I'd like to read the following statement. This meeting is being held in person and or remotely as an alternate means of public access pursuant to Chapter 107 of the Acts of 2022 and all other applicable laws temporarily amending certain provisions of the open meeting law. You are hereby advised that this meeting and all communications during this meeting may be recorded by the town of Hingham in accordance with the open meeting law. If any participant wishes to record this meeting, please notify the chair at the start of the meeting in accordance with Mass General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 20F, so that the chair may inform all other participants of said recording. Is anyone else recording this meeting? Okay, thank you. Seeing none, we'll move to the first item on our agenda, which is questions from the public on items that are not on the agenda. And we have some people here and zooming in. So let me ask if there are any questions. Please raise your hand if you're zooming in. Seeing none, we move on to the next item on our agenda, which is the minutes from September the 13th. Tina?
We had very minor edits. Andy and I did a little wordsmithing to make them more digestible for our dental readers. And I sent those changes. They're very minor, just commenting about the select board working to determine the amount of the operational override. And the South Shore Country Club pool, we just reworded it, but there's no actual change to the logo.
Okay. Are there any other additional comments for the minutes of the 13th? All right, seeing none, I will accept the motion. So moved. Okay, we have nobody joining us via Zoom, so you don't have to do a roll call vote. So all in approval, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Okay. All right. So our agenda items tonight are really to review and discuss the comments that have been drafted so far for the various articles. Tonight we have Dr. Margaret, as well as Michelle Ayer and Linda Hill. Linda, we don't have a forum, right?
Actually, we do, because I think there's a member on, Zoom.
Okay.
No, that's three of us, we don't.
You do not. Okay.
And we are posted just in case.
I know, I saw you posted. So we will take up Foster first. Al, you want to lead us through the comment? And I know that you have a couple of questions. We'll do some follow-up here. So.
Other than saying, so I distributed this. I know, George, you commented, we have language specifically on the tax impact that I can insert. And I will do that. Nancy just sent her comments, and so I will go through those, and I imagine incorporate all of those. In my last look through at it, I wanted to add maybe a little clearer on, well, I'm wondering if it's clear enough what the town is actually borrowing, but I guess it is. I was debating whether it was clear enough on the 113, whether the town is, we need to approve it all, but really tinker with clarifying that a bit.
But you had a question about.
And then the largest thing to add, in my mind, is a section that would get at what are the implications of a disapproving vote for where we are. So that was why you asked.
Right.
The gang to come in.
So I have invited Dr. Atwood and Michelle to join us and provide some clarity on what actions might be considered or have been contemplated. And if either of you or both of you would like to join us, in the especially designated seats up there.
Only so the microphones. Right.
Just while they're setting up too, I did also sort of mean to take out the recommended parts, since we haven't recommended anything. All right, that was sort of placeholder-ish language, yes, I would clarify that that is as yet undetermined.
Thank you. I feel like it's like most official like.
Oh, it's a brand new seat.
It doesn't-
I know for tonight, so.
Anyway. So I guess I'll just start, we have a few thoughts around what the consequences would be if we weren't able to get this passed at time meeting, in the Foster building. Nothing in stone, so we don't want it to be unduly alarming to anyone because nothing has been solidified, discussed publicly in meetings. But Dr. Adams has some thoughts about what would sort of be that we're sort of starting to percolate in our heads, like what are the options that we would have, right? If the building is, I mean, the building is coming to the end of its useful life at some point in the next several years, right? So if we find a new building to replace it, what will our options be? The one option that the school building committee had started out with when we were in feasibility work was, can the school be renovated, right? Do you need to build a new school? And the answer was just no, it's just, there's not enough there to renovate. So I'll turn over to Dr. Adams, what he's thinking, so if remodeling or renovating is not an option, what would be next?
So, and I want to echo Michelle's comment that, anything that we plan, in November where it's not successful, we would have to undergo the planning process, involve stakeholders, get feedback, and go through a thorough process to try to identify different pathways. And there are several pathways we can take. And again, this is my professional opinion, professional in the field, ideas of how we might proceed, and including some members of the leadership team and sort of brainstorming. So I think it's important to make that big caution. But like Michelle said, we know the building is coming to its end. I heard Katie St. Clair, the manager of facilities, say very well, is the building is not like replacing a boiler or an HVAC. It's really the bones of the building, the piping, the conduits, everything. And you could just imagine if you've ever had any work done, that means, you know, taking down walls and that's just a huge piece of the project that the school building committee already looked at as an option. Another option might be to find some other place that would house the students that are currently at the Foster. That other place, even if we could locate a place, would be a temporary solution if we were able to lease it. Investing funding and dollars to renovate and get a building up to speed for a short amount of time isn't fiscally responsible. And isn't a long-term solution. The third possibility might be to redistrict, to look at going from 4 elementary schools to 3 elementary schools. That would require identifying spaces in all of those other remaining 3 elementary schools that would now be repurposed to classroom spaces. That might be looking at art rooms, music rooms, spaces that are dedicated to specialists, looking at special education spaces and how they're being used, and seeing if there are ways to consolidate to make space for general education programs, classroom spaces to house students. We will likely run out of space at some point. You heard as part of this process that we need spaces for special education programming. We need spaces for preschool programming. We haven't, as everyone is experiencing, more young children with special needs, and we are required by law to provide special ed programming in Gen 3. And we just need more space. We're not able to currently provide, so we will need to find space to address that particular need. So in some way, all 4, 3, 4, 5 remaining schools will need to be very carefully looked for remaining spaces. In looking for addition, we're gonna run out of space at some point and still have specific needs. The additional option would be to look at modular classroom spaces. And look at creation of modulars on the buildings that we currently have. And that gets complicated, those, is there space planned appropriate to build those? And going through a project to build them if they're not cheap. Some cost estimates are that we've seen is about 1.1 million for just a classroom. And also that's a short-term solution. Most modular spaces, they're modular home. They're gonna last up to, I've heard up as little as 5 years, depending on the construction, and I've seen them last up to 10 or 12 years, but then they start to deteriorate. They're just, and having 25 children in the classroom space, they're not built for long-term use. You'll see them used often for short-term solutions. And there are all kinds of complications that happen when you look at each building. For example, today we were discussing Plymouth River doesn't have sprinklers. So any addition to that building would have sprinklers, but then would require that we add sprinklers to all of the classrooms in order to be compliant. So I'm sure as we dig in, there would be additional complications such as that would increase the cost of that as we move forward. We truly believe that that as we start planning this, we could see a tremendous impact on the programs and services that we're able to offer students. This obviously would not be immediate. It would have to be a planning process. But we would look to try to phase out the foster 3 years into the future. And if needed, maybe just a little bit more, but I think that's the life of the building.
I think the only thing I would say is that it's, the reality of it is no matter what direction we go in, it's gonna cost money, right? And so we have a expensive but long-term solution, which would be to rebuild the school, and then we could cobble together some short-term solutions, but those would still cost money and start becoming exponentially expensive if you have to replace modular vacuum every 5 years, and then,
So I was gonna just reach over you guys for a second.
Another,
Can I, go ahead.
sorry.
Go.
Another scenario is, I think, and I was just confirming with Ray, is that if we didn't pass November 1st, we'd have 120 days to hold another town meeting.
120 days from August 31st, so really to the end of the year.
Still the end.
To try to get another positive vote. So that's another option.
Okay, just 1 second. Can they be picked up from where they are?
I can move.
You'd have to ask the people on Zoom.
Okay,
Carrie, can you hear Linda and Ray?
Saying anything yet.
I can hear you.
Linda?
We can hear you.
all right, thank you.
So, Ray, SD School Building, just to kind of layer on top of what Margaret and Michelle talked about, just to give a little bit of context. So we did look into, as required by the MSBA, an addition renovation project for the existing school. I think we talked about this before. It would have taken several years because it would have had to have been done in phases, right? So while that happens, you've got to relocate kids. So you still got an issue of redistricting, relocating, not what people want. Second, we determined it would be more costly to do that. Third, you still got a building that's in floodplain in 50 years, right? The only portion of that building that's not in the floodplain projected in 50 years is the kindergarten wing, right? Really, that's probably the only portion of that building that would remain, and the rest of it would go in phases. Exponentially expensive to do. So we kind of put that aside pretty quickly once we examined it. in terms of redistricting, so my kids went to Plymouth River before East opened in 2009. And I think the number was 735, but I think there was 735 kids at PRS before East opened, before they dispersed and redistrict. That's a huge number of kids at a little tiny one-story school like that. I think the enrollment, correct me if I'm wrong, but the peak of our enrollment before COVID was around 4,300, give or take. I know we've dropped below that, and you were at 38-ish hundred or so. I think we're right about where the peak enrollment was 13 years ago before East opened, around 3,800. I have to check the math, but I think that's about right. So we're looking at comparable numbers now if we were to redistrict and disperse among the three schools, if something were to happen now, right? And regardless of COVID and the impacts that have followed, we still have an enrollment study that says there's going to be more growth. Whether that happens or not, I don't know, but that's what it says, right? That's what the MSBA banks on. With respect to modulars, so those of you who were around in 2008 know that when we put 7 million, and Alan led this charge, 7 million into PRS and Foster, we also spent $700,000, 6 modular classrooms for the middle school, because we had to pick a project. The MSBA said pick a project, and pick elementary. We couldn't do the middle school yet, so we did a stopgap. 6 modular classrooms that were essentially an extension cost $700,000 then. When we demolished the building, we actually had to pay $50,000 to get rid of it. Interesting. And that was so installed in 2008 summer, 2014 was when, so 6 years. Okay. I think Margaret mentioned the price of one classroom. Our architect actually has involvement in another project that was just purchasing modular classrooms. And I think the cost for a similar configuration that we did in the middle school was 4 million and change or something like that. So it's exponentially more expensive than it was back in 2008. So all of these things are time, money, inconvenience, incredible inconvenience. So, you know, our kind of focus has been, this is the shot we had, and we've got to make this work.
And you may have mentioned it before, Ray, I wonder, but if we were not to approve this project, and in 6 months we realized we made a big mistake, would we have any chance of going back to the MSBA and say, hey, we want to come back into the program?
Be starting from scratch.
Yeah.
Which would be another 5 to 7 year process. And I think one thing is, our architect mentioned is feasibility. They've already reimbursed the feasibility once. They won't do that again. So you have to pay for that all on our own. And who knows what school construction is going to cost in 7 years. If they choose us to come back into the program, you never know whether that's going to be successful or not. So that's a risk also.
Yeah, we've been very fortunate with 2 projects with them, and this one, you know, it took a 3rd try to convince them, or maybe it was just a matter of how the chips fell and the dollars worked out in that year. But yeah, if we don't get the vote within the prescribed time, we get kicked out of the pipeline, and we have to start over from scratch.
Or you can choose to go without the assistance of the MSBA and not get the reimbursement and pay for it all.
Right. So. Okay, so failure to pass is significantly more expensive, both in the short term and in the long term.
Yes.
And from an educational standpoint, it's probably a step down, trying to squeeze more kids into the existing schools and
It would definitely.
taking away from art space and whatever, so.
Yeah.
It's an impact from an educational standpoint.
I mean, I think it's fair to say that it would be significant disruption in what people expect from the schools and what students deserve from school, particularly coming out of these past two COVID years, right? I mean, they're the learning loss across the nation. I don't ever use the word falling behind because everyone did, right? Everyone's in the same store. Everyone had different boats, but we were all in the same store. I think it would be a real significant disruption. I mean, I remember my kids were at PRS as well, and I think there was a little bit of, we didn't know better, right? That like just doesn't always come apart, right? That was sort of the way the kids learned, but there's different needs now and different expectations.
No.
Well, thank you. I think we can worthwhile discussion. Clear on it. Continue to accept other comments on this thing.
Do other members of the committee have questions of Dr. Adams, Michelle, Ray, Linda?
Yes, I have Sarah. Sarah's on Zoom.
Sarah? Oh, okay. All right, thank you. Andy,
Should we include the bullet points in the comment of what the alternatives are, if there were a no vote on this?
That's what we just.
Yeah,
That was my intention.
yeah,
I just wanted to hear.
and you have,
I didn't want to make them up myself.
you have the bullet points.
okay,
I think we just have to be very careful, like, Dr. Adams said, to, you know, a whole committee would have to be put together to study it instead. We don't want to just jump to the conclusion that, yes, we're gonna have modulars at the 3 elementary schools in Brick District, because that'll set off a panic. I mean, I don't know how you address that in your comments, but I think we have to be careful about what we say, because it's not fact.
But there are very limited options.
Yes,
That's
yeah.
the reality of it, that all of them are bad from an education perspective. All of them will cost money, will not be cheap. And none of them addresses the issue that we need a new school building. And if not today, then someday. And this, I think the original decision that we needed a new school building was made in 2005. And it postponing the inevitable and creating enormous problems in the interim. I'm trying to think of an appropriate analogy. It's almost like not providing funds or a piece of fire apparatus, you know, the current apparatus, the breakdown has to be jumped down the side. Well, we're not going to pay what it costs to buy new fire apparatus. To me, it's that stark. I do wonder if Jason can help us on this, perhaps I could be so. Is there a way to say how much money the town has not spent in the 16 years since the original decision was made to replace the school?
You mean in terms of like the financing costs we've saved by not borrowing earlier? So
I guess that's what I'm asking. You know, when you defer,
or said different, if we had done it, ultimately, are we really paying any more than we've done? Have we done it 16 years ago?
The cost of funds.
Yeah, I mean, either way, I mean, you would think that if the focus is on the current cost, then arguably, yeah, I mean, it's hard to normalize, but what would the cost have been had we done it 16 years ago versus today? right on any basis, but we'd have to make some assumptions on what how discount rates work.
I guess I was thinking sort of the town's use of the money over the 16 years.
In different ways. Yeah, well, I mean, arguably, we invested in the middle school. We could construct something, I'm not sure. But my initial reaction to that is I'm not sure the voters would absorb it the right way. That's my initial reaction.
Isn't it almost more what the taxpayers,
No data in there.
yeah, I think it's what the taxpayers would have done with the money in those 16 years, because that's where the financing is coming from, right, at the end of the day. And that's, that's so impossible to quantify.
But there is a rate of return. I mean, you could say,
Yeah, I
that's
mean,
like this much money. And
I just think I'm just
I-
suggesting it opens a door where somebody could make an argument that building costs have gone up more than rates of return or less than, and it'd be the one to answer.
I think
I
you're,
don't think it adds or. It's just be fine with plain in some ways.
Did you have a question?
Mine are just how across our 3 article comments do we provide sort of consistent language? So I apologize to whichever AdCom member sent out something about would the new school be called Foster, maybe not, should we refer to it as Foster or not? I apologize to whoever sent that message out, but that is a question. Do we want to refer to this as a new elementary school, as the new Foster, again, across all 3 comments? Because all 3 do reference the capital projects. Right now we call them Foster. So
Yeah, I have that same question, and it also means if that part of if it's supposed to be new elementary school, then we should change the titles of the article. Construction of new elementary. It doesn't have a new name yet. It is referred to as.
I thought in that comment was made, it's certainly legitimate, maybe there's a way to say, to highlight, hasn't been named yet, but for sort of simplicity of discussion, since everyone's familiar with it as Foster.
And it might open up another can of worms.
I think Ray has.
Yeah, I can answer. So, there's a naming bylaw committee, Bill Edmondson has headed up. I think they met last evening. They presented to the select board a couple of weeks ago. So that's an ongoing process. And I think their plan is to maybe present next April, if they think an amendment to the existing naming bylaw is appropriate. The focus so far has not been on buildings per se, although I was present at a number of the meetings and I did mention and reminded Phil actually by email yesterday about Foster. Because the new school will be a new school. It will not be Foster Elementary School. So it will have to be affirmatively named. Perhaps it will be named Foster again. That's not up to us, right? That's up. Right now, that's up to town meeting. According to the bylaw, town meeting names buildings in this town. So in order to name the new elementary school, town meeting would have to do that. Unless there's a change in the naming bylaw.
So for the purposes of our articles, for our comments, how do we want to refer to this project? It's a really good question, right?
And I think it's important to be consistent, and if it's simply a new elementary school, I don't think we really want to get into the comment about it will have to be named, because that's gonna open up a whole other. I remember the last time we had a discussion about whether something should be named.
That was part of, I'm a little burnt from that one too. so-
Yeah, I suspect you are also.
If we help, the way that we have crafted language when we're referring to it is the new elementary school to replace Foster, right? Or the new elementary school in North Hingham, or in protocol, or example.
I think our point is just, it should be
And
consistent.
across all 3 comments, that's why I'm trying to get us to hammer on to something that we will all use. That's,
And so we've also asked our architect to remove Foster from images of the new school because
for the
there's.
same reason. right?
Yeah.
Right. So the new elementary school, should we refer to that?
The new elementary school to replace Foster.
Is that agreeable?
So people don't think we're creating a new 5th elementary school.
It's not, right now, it is Foster.
I just think you're saying the new elementary school. I don't know that it needs.
Okay, I think Lindsay had a question.
I just had a procedural question in terms of just messaging the right importance on November 1st. I know there was a comment that one alternative is you thought those 120 days, so you in theory could have another town meeting. Does sequentially it have to pass at town meeting and then pass on the ballot? So it couldn't pass on the ballot and then pass at town meeting, so it seems like that.
I don't believe that's true. I think we asked Tom Mayo that question
Yeah, I don't think it matters.
and
to speak
we
with-
checked with town
Remember,
council.
we have 120.
Correct.
December 31st.
I agree with that. I just wanted to make the point that, like, we wouldn't be able to have another election, so I wasn't sure if we really do have that additional time or not. I wouldn't want us to message out that there's like some little bit of buffer and there actually isn't any.
Well,
buffer.
we need to have both votes secured by the end of December, because that would be what's called a local approvals that the MSBA requires for.
Right, and I'm just wondering if the order matters.
Yeah, I think the way the ballot, that exclusion question is worded, it doesn't have an amount in it. It's not specific. It refers to this project, but that's it. So I do not think the sequence is required.
And I don't know if we want to say we could have another special town meeting, which would also cost more money
Right.
in the comment. I think we don't want to.
No,
So I had another question about the comment at the very end. Is it necessary to have all of this sequencing about how the project will complete? That just seemed too much to me. Usually what we just say is it's expected a new elementary school would open in whenever. This seems like more
Can
detail.
I just interrupt you for a second? Do we have any more questions for Dr. Adams or Michelle? They have been running around multiple nights this week.
Sorry.
I don't know how to stop them. So keep going.
If we have no further questions, then we can thank them and let them go on their way. Ray, would you
So they're
welcome to stay or do it?
Yeah,
You are, of course, are welcome to stay as well.
I'm really just here to answer questions that may come up to the extent I can and to assist with the comments to the extent that that's welcome. I provided comments already. I haven't seen anything further since then. I'm happy to help or not, whichever.
Thank you. We appreciate your support. And I know you've been running around there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But for what it's worth, I just note that the weekly question, special town meeting question is the week. Refer to the new elementary.
Yeah, no, all of the stuff that's been coming out, because after I saw that comment, I actually went back and looked at things and it all talks about the.
Yeah, at the outset of the PR campaign, we had a conversation with the person they hired to do it. And I specifically said, we should not refer to it as author because, and he said, oh, that makes really good sense. So everyone got on board with that.
Except for.
All right, Evelyn, let's go back to you.
Yeah, so I wondered about all of the detail. It just felt to me like it was too much information about, we're gonna send out these bids, we're gonna do that. I mean, this comment is about why you can support our doing this. And this seemed to be, other than when the timeline for when the school would open is what people will want to know. But I could be looking at that totally different. I felt like it was-
Made a similar comment too. I guess I would like, I think it's important specifying this town election part. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. The town election part, and then when the school.
But getting rid of the site work bids.
Yeah, I mean, that just feels like it's, we're in the weeds and I don't know how much we want people to get in the weeds.
We'll focus on the important part.
Yep.
How much is the crowd?
Agreed.
And I thought it worked to break things out into sections as well, because this is such a complicated comment. That's all I had. And again, in terms of consistency across the way the material is presented for each of the different articles, have we settled on a way of describing the financial impact, positive in terms of health and utilization fund, challenging in terms of tax increases, in terms of the median property value and listing that amount, not, I mean, I think there's some difference between what I put in the one for Article C and what Nancy put in for A, and Al, I think is still writing B, so I'm just gonna kind of pick an approach and then use it sort of consistently, I think. Helpful to taxpayers to compare.
So the approach that Nancy has in hers is the approach of the rules that Foster also. And I thought I had sent out that language, but I've been having trouble with my sending stuff, so. So I sent it to him earlier.
The only thing with Al, the numbers that you need to put, I didn't look them up, but the numbers that need to go in there have to be without the 7 million
It is.
in order to be consistent. So it's it assumes that C isn't there.
That's what it's.
Okay.
Yes.
I didn't realize.
The one for Article 8 doesn't identify what the median assessed value on property is. Is that something we want to include, that people know what we're referring to? 700 or 700.
That's a good-
739, 400.
Yeah.
Most recently.
Yeah.
listed, right? So just to sort of have the same numbers.
Yeah, no, that's a good.
And do we want to call it median home value or median property value? It's homeowners who will be voting, and it's obviously property owners who all of them will be paying.
It is the median property. Yeah.
Okay, those are the consistencies I was hoping to get, so. Okay.
Good. Thank you.
And your editor has made note of those.
Oh, okay. All of us, I'll be looking it up, for instance, we've read them so many times, we don't recognize. And then George is my chat, so, thank you.
If we're talking about consistencies, one of the things that I commented on C, and I changed some of the verbiage that had been suggested to me for, I'm sorry, not C, for A, and I changed some of the verbiage that was put into B as well. Given the latest news cycle, I'm really reticent that we would put any suggestion in there that there's gonna be cost savings because these buildings are electric. That we really have no data to support it one way or the other. And I think that we're opening ourselves up to a lot of questions that none of us are gonna be able to answer on the floor of town meeting. So I think that we just say that these buildings are electric, given the direction that we were given by the town wanting to go in a net zero direction. But I'm reticent to say that we are actually going to get cost savings from that. And then the other thing I also want to make sure is that we don't actually have a net zero policy in town yet. That has not been voted on and approved, so it's just a direction that we've been pointed in. So I just want to be clear on that in the article as well. And both articles, but I think that's a point of consistency. For our editors.
Interesting question.
I
Do
think it's
you have a
for-
perspective on the saving?
I refer to it as achieving Hingham's net zero goals, right? That's very
Yeah, that's good.
innocuous
Yeah.
and
And that's specific.
amorphous, right?
Right.
Which is always good when you're not really sure. With respect to, I mean, we did an energy model and we showed that what we're gonna put in, whether it's ground source heat pumps or air source heat pumps, is gonna be less energy used, which assuming electric costs remain.
That's the problem. That's the assumption.
Obviously, our utility has to get it from someplace. Those prices will go up, so we will feel that impact as well, perhaps not as much as those who use Eversource or whomever. So I think you're right. I think there's no guarantee, but the model says that maintenance costs will certainly be less.
That you can say.
And, potentially, depending on, utility costs. We could save significantly over the life of it. And I think there's a way to say it without committing to it. I think it's dancing, but.
I think it's
that's the
dancing,
living
and
language.
it's been in the news too much, and it takes away from what we need to be focused on passing these articles because we need buildings.
Yeah.
And we're gonna pay for energy costs, whatever they are, and wherever they are, and we will figure out how to keep the lights on.
I don't wanna,
Yeah, it's a bonus.
I agree with you, Nancy, but it creates a potential sideshow that we just don't need, because we can say it differently.
Going back to Article A, so that would mean you would take out of Article A the operating cost savings, that the estimated incremental annual energy cost savings of approximately 37,000 per year. You would just take that specific number out.
I think that's.
I think that's what.
I think that's a very good suggestion. And frankly, in the grand scheme, a $100 million building, 37,000 is something. Well done.
and there was like the last
It
one
will.
too, when we were saying the last line of that paragraph too. It's, I had noted here, we need to at least soften and stuff. Because it will be less than, we know about that, so I think it's throughout that.
Yeah, I would
Well,
take out that last sentence too.
Given insulation, I think we do actually go that way, but you're right, we have no data to support it, we just know what insulation.
And
is.
that's kind of like what the case.
With new insulation, when there's really one more.
I think you focus on less energy usage.
Exactly.
And not on.
And
therefore lower- and therefore lower
Yeah.
carbon.
Yeah.
And the maintenance costs will be less, you can say that, you don't have to give them.
Right,
And your carbon will be less, so all
Right.
those are.
right,
But why invite something negative that you don't want to have to deal with?
Right.
Just
I'm sorry, I'm with you.
keep it positive.
Yeah.
So just to be clear, Nancy, what you're recommending, I think, is that section C is no longer called operating cost savings, it's worked into energy.
yeah,
That's a
that, or
Well-
compliance with, that's a good point, Jason, I don't know what you call it, compliance with the town's desire for, that's a word too. big,
Energy
but
efficiency.
Something, energy efficiency,
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's-
yeah,
Are the costs of building an electric infrastructure, utility infrastructure higher than
Usually.
more traditional?
No.
Or
Well,
are they lower or higher? Or the same?
the upfront cost of the HVAC system is certainly more than if it were fossil fuels or, a hybrid, system or something like that. But you get that return on investment over time because of lower maintenance and cost savings in energy.
Because I mean, what's really, those are fine, specific points to other things, but what. Actually, I did have in my mind of tinkering with, because it's in a section, it's C of a list of what are the cost drivers. And sort of, we say, hey, it says. Cost of the project is 113 million. We get this, sort of, I wanted to make an upfront statement saying, yeah, I know this is friggin' a lot of money. All right. Just because that's what the response is gonna be, and so we say, I wanted to acknowledge it, and sort of say, well, but there are several reasons for it. And it's the programming stuff, and so.
Perfect.
So as we talked about at the discussion of net zero at town meeting, we sort of said, hey, everybody. You should know, a lot of times it's gonna cost more upfront. But we're saying as a community, there are other downstream benefits that we think that's worthwhile. It is part of it, so.
And my counter argument to that would be, that, again, the town, at town meeting, the town came forward and said, we want buildings to be net zero. And created a committee, create a policy, that policy doesn't exist yet, these two buildings are in front of that policy. And I struggle with the fact that we are now putting the demands of the town from a cost perspective onto two building projects that are ahead of what the town has actually vetted as to what they're willing to do. And I think we should remove that, because we went at the direction of the town to go toward the direction of net zero. That was the direction that town meeting gave us, right? Gave the building committees at that point to do that. It is to me, a different discussion to say,
how is the town going to pay to get to net zero? And it's too big a thing to put on these individual projects, in my opinion.
But it's not to put that these projects are being developed with the consistency towards the goal of net zero. Which
Yeah.
was very, so that's, I think.
But
that's-
justifying the cost of like what Al was going down the path of, it's more expensive to do it. We can say that, but
I don't know
getting
that we
in-
have to say that, actually.
yeah,
I don't,
I don't know if I'm.
I mean,
I think
we
I
can
you
say that-
understand what I'm saying, but I'm not articulating.
The
it
buildings
as
are being
I could, but-
designed consistent with what town meeting
Right,
asked be done.
right, the desire of the town, and get out of justifying the cost of that, because that's a different, to me, that's a different decision for the town to make.
Can I ask a question? Just the net zero policy that we're moving towards, I'm assuming that's something to do with carbon emissions or something to that effect, right? So there really isn't a cost consideration in that, in the sense that I don't think I'm hearing movement towards, net zero policies will result in cost savings to the town, unless that's part of the policy initiative. I don't think that's the case, right? So just where I'm going with that is, there's some level of moving towards net zero has costs associated with it, but the benefits are a bit more qualitative than quantitative, right? In the sense that carbon emissions and or energy efficiency and so on and so forth. So I think if we just talk about that and move away from the cost savings, maybe we address the issue the way that it's intended.
Or expenses for the building. Building the infrastructure itself.
But what Ethel said was he was trying to identify some items that are causing higher costs than perhaps people would have expected. And the paragraph C does not address, excuse me, does not expressly mention net zero. But it does say that the energy operating costs.
It does talk about net zero in the next to the last sentence.
Which is what I'm saying, I don't like the way that came out, and less about the objections that were raised, which are fine. It's more of that, of saying, there's across the town, there's gonna be the sticker shock, and so, and everyone's gonna say, why the hell does it cost so much? And so very reasonably, you want to say, well, here's why, and
But do we need to say that in the comment? Because it seems to me we could say if that question was raised at town meeting, we could say town meeting directed us to have this, to be working on these net zero goals, and that's more money up front. I mean, that's.
it's my personal perspective. I think it's part of the answer. We say it's 113 million. A lot of people now say, what? That's crazy. How did it possibly get to that number? And so we say, well, it's programming, and it's partially inflation, and it's some of these specific things that we do. What am I
Or in your.
and it's the site, it's having to do with, we first of all addressed, there's no other site. We're saying, one big cost driver is the site, because of all we have to do to dig it into the hill and everything. And the counter to that, which we've already addressed, is there's a lot of research on other properties, and we said, no, none of them workable, we're stuck on this site. So what do we do on the site? Do we renovate it? No, you have to do a new school. In order to do a new school, this is what you have to do to the site. And that's a huge number in terms of driving the cost. Then you have these programming things about the state's making us have an enrollment thing. We have to have these classroom specific sizes. We have to have special education because of the decisions that school committee and the school administration community have collaboratively decided this is the education we want to provide to people in Hingham. That drives cost. Then there's nothing has changed in the design in how many months, and there were, when we first started talking about this, we were saying, oh my God, it's $70 million. What the hell? How was it $70 million? And now it's 113, right? I mean, and because inflation is the driver there. And then another one is to build an oil burner HVAC system would be $10 million. But to build an electric infrastructure is $14 million, or, obviously totally made up those numbers for the record. But that kind of thing, that's part of how you get to a large number. And so you're saying we're crazy to come up with this number? Well, not crazy. Here's the decisions that are driving that.
So that's the
Yeah.
cost of energy efficiency.
And that.
And the net zero policy, when we talked about it, we said as a town, look, this is something as a world we need to do, but everyone knows going in, there's gonna be costs associated. Upfront immediate costs.
Yeah, and I guess then, maybe back to Jason's point of, the C says.
See, it's wrongly formatted.
Yeah, so
That's
energy,
totally
I
not-
think if we talk about energy efficiencies and talk about any solid savings, we say it's a cost driver. And it's going toward net zero and leave out any suppositions about what we assume, what we think might happen with energy costs.
Yes,
So energy efficiency is lowering carbon.
Right,
Right,
use
the
less.
efficiency, right.
Regardless of how you get your energy, it's gonna use less.
The efficiency is staying on our plan.
Can I just frame it for a second? So, I understand what you're getting at, Alan, and I do think it's important to tell that story, but let's be clear and find a way to say it, that this is not a Hingham issue, right? So you talked about the size of the classrooms and this and that. So every project with the MSBA and the Commonwealth has to comply with those space guidelines, right? It's not Hingham.
I think I say that.
It's not, but we need to frame it properly, right? I don't think our HVA system is driving the cost of this. What's driving the cost of this project is the fact that we're doing it now in a global economy that has push and pulls related to, COVID and other things going on in the world, right? That are continuing to drive inflation and other issues. We have labor shortage and cost of labor has increased. The availability of material, these are specific things, but the availability of and price of materials that are coming from other places like steel and whatnot, those are cost drivers. Those are significant.
I bundle that in.
Right, no, absolutely. But I think like our situation is no different than anyone else in the Commonwealth experiencing this now or across the country. And with respect to net zero, the MSBA keeps having these seminars, right? And these programs, and they're pushing schools in the direction. MSBA requires you to comply with a certain level of the energy code, right? We're designed to be, I think, 20% more efficient than the energy code. But I think every school coming out right now is as well, right? So we're not on an island. Hingham is not on an island. And whether we have a net zero policy or not, this is kind of a direction that we as a town have decided to go in, which is consistent, frankly, with the rest of the Commonwealth and frankly, the nation at this point. In terms of school building, this is just how you build schools today. And it happens to be a lot more expensive because of a number of factors. I think you can frame it in a way without getting specific on the cost of the HVA system, HAC, you know what I mean? I think
This is somehow asked, but I agree, and that's what I'm saying. Again, I think there's a responsibility to say, how the hell do you get to 113 million? And that's part of the answer.
And I think
it's well justified. I don't disagree with it. It's a well justified answer, but I think you gotta have an answer. It's part of how you get
And you've also
6% of the town to say,
number of.
to not say those people are crazy.
But now we, under financing, you've listed a number of ways of items that have driven the cost of it.
That's
We certainly can't list every single item that's driven the cost. But, here are some examples, construction costs, cost of materials, cost of labor. The hillsides work that needs to be done. The technology, the furniture and fixtures. And so there are a number of things in there, and if somebody does raise a question from the floor.
you could also say we don't get 80% reimbursement like Quincy does, right? We don't get 57% or 60% or 70% like Ranger does or Wayne does.
I don't know.
That's another
That
factor.
river.
I also don't know how much we want to focus on what's driving the cost of the MSBA program. Because one question could be, then why are we doing all this work to be in this program if it's costing us more money? So could we have a cheaper, if we weren't in the program, could we be paying $70 million? So I just think it's I know there are answers to that, but it's the more we raise things, the more we invite questions of the decisions that we make. So just throw that out there.
Sorry, I will rework C. It didn't come out with my original intention, but that
Yeah.
was originally my intention and I didn't.
All right, additional comments? You got a few.
Al's like, I'm gonna leave now.
Oh, you know. It's all part of the process. Democracy. Big issue, difficult comment about it.
Yeah, that's right.
Kudos to you and Kristen.
Last way, question. So. I generally looked at this project and thought through the lens that the MSBA component of it was an important, right, that fundamentally, 113, whatever the number happens to be, the reality is we're getting a significant reimbursement on that, so whatever inflation drivers or other things, exogenous variables that are affecting our timing now, we can't lose sight of the fact that we're getting a big reimbursement for it. Which is probably going to be there in the future, I think, for all the reasons we highlighted. And maybe we don't know this, but is it, just on that point, is it the MSBA program that's really driving the promise?
It's a little bit. So the answer is, it is more expensive as a whole to do a school the way they want you to do it.
Sure.
Because of the requirements that they set forth, because of the hoops that you have to jump through, the different stages, the eligibility, the feasibility, all the filings, all the, I mean, when we file stuff, it's like this, electronic, and then it's crazy stuff, right? All the costs, tons of money. The countless hours, I can't tell you how much time I've been spending with the architect in the last month. I can't tell you, it's crazy. Preparing for all this permitting stuff. So all the hoops.
The hoops, I get the soft costs.
It definitely is, does it come close to reaching the benefit that we're gonna get? No, it doesn't. But
Even they're in a position where they're aside from soft costs in terms of, we wouldn't really be able to alter space.
I think educationally, the requirements that they're asking for requirements to be all.
Yes,
They are more than what we would want if we were building it.
and we wouldn't be turning around and doing a project that was substantially different, simply.
Right.
Right.
But we wouldn't, well, we probably develop an educational plan anyway, right? But we wouldn't have to develop that plan to have it vetted by the MSBA, then vetted and approved by the DESC. Then alter spaces based on comments from the DESC. If we were doing this alone, that wouldn't happen, right? So all of those things are just kind of examples of the process that does make it a little cumbersome, does cost time and money. But as you said at the outset, the benefit that we're going to derive is you can't shake your head at $25 million, which is ultimately what we're going to do.
Right, I mean, the idea.
Assuming the numbers are what they are.
Yeah, I mean, the idea that there's, $47 million, let's say, outside of store costs, right? Sort of lend your point that the MSBA is driving those costs, obviously. So fundamentally, again, like it's that 40% that's coming back on the 60 that's basically helping us offset the 47, which arguably would always be there, probably, right? In the sense of if we were gonna, if the reality was this was the place we needed to build the school, these are the things we need to do to the site, all this other stuff had to happen. So a huge percentage of this 47, let's say, is sticky, like it's not gonna go away, like maybe timing, inflation or whatnot, but. The reason I raise this, like, I just think that this component of the MSBA reimbursement is a really big deal. Right, even though it's not as much as we really want more, of course, but the idea that if we didn't do this and we waited and lost this financing, the chances that the future project costs of the school are 70 million, for example, seem like not likely. Is weirdly what I kind of, that's where I.
No, I agree with you, which is why I think raising, sort of putting it on these costs are because of the MSBA is a danger thing to do. If that's not true.
Well, I actually, what I thought adding, one of the things I liked in the article was highlighting also that the MSBA, we shouldn't look at the MSBA reimbursement rate as some sort of failure on the building committee. But it's that nobody's getting 100%, that they do it, they say, this is what we're gonna reimburse. But nobody can build a building for that. So, you know, your reimbursement rate has more to do with demographics of your town, probably, than your need, than what it actually costs to build a building.
And the viability of their program, right? In
Right.
order to give grants to hundreds of schools, they have to limit what they do, and that's making thresholds on construction costs and all of those other things. Because if they didn't put a limit, and you had a $600 per square foot building in every town, they'd run out of money.
Isn't it just a difference in the size? Having to build to 600 students instead of 400 and something. But we did our own enrollment study and came up with the same number. I mean, that's a number that we very well could have built to ourselves based on, I mean, their enrollment study was a valid study.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, we've talked about that, and the answer to that is COVID.
right.
COVID impacted the enrollments of schools in Hingham and across the country. I think more so in a town like Hingham, because folks in Hingham have alternatives for to send their kids to school, right? So, you know, were it not for COVID, we'd be at 4,400 kids right now and growing. Right? A lot of us, we send kids to private school every year, but not the numbers that we have in the last 2 years.
Like when we built the middle school, we had a larger enrollment than we say less. So,
That's probably true.
Further questions on the new elementary school replacing Foster?
I'm happy to say it's not referred to in my article.
Okay, we good?
Did Al get enough guidance?
I think he's guided.
Well guided.
Well, undoubtedly have to review this again.
How would you like to do now? We'll start.
Did George Nancy actually shares the news, our permitting says? Or maybe not.
We were gonna catch that at some point, but by all means.
Well,
if
just
you-
that, we met with both boards last night and were continued until October 12th. There was actually a suggestion and a request to continue it longer than that and push into November for a decision by the planning board, and we refused that request. Because we said we needed to have this done before then.
I certainly agree
And they committed to that.
with the statements that you made to the fact that both AdCom and the select board have expressed the desire to have both projects permitted by town meeting. I did notice as I put it on the calendar that the 31st is holiday.
I'm well aware of that.
That's why town meeting is a Sunday.
I know.
Is how many?
Usually Monday after spring break.
But Halloween, they call us back.
Yeah, fair enough.
So,
Yeah.
so further questions on Foster,
The new.
new elementary.
Current thought.
Formerly known as
Thank you guys, you are of course welcome to stay or depart. I guess I should ask the members of the public if there are any questions about the Foster comment discussions that we've had. If you raise your hand. Okay, I see a hand raised by Glenn Mangorian. And Glenn, you're okay.
Hi, Glenn Mangarian for Huckleberry Hill. I think that you should be prepared to answer two related questions. One is, what's your confidence that you will be able to build the school for $113 million? It's the first question. And the second is, what's your confidence in the assumption you have, whatever the interest rate that you're going to borrow at?
Thank you, Glenn. I think those are certainly worthwhile questions. Are there additional questions from any of the people who are watching watching us on Zoom? Okay. All right, seeing none, then we will move on to a discussion of the public safety building.
Formerly known as North. I got, just a minor comments, as always, Brenda was brilliant in helping wordsmith anything energy related. So, that part of the comment got tweaked a little, and then, per Lindsay's comment right now, I did change it. And, so Al, if you want to change yours to reflect. So I've changed it to say, if this article is approved using a 10-year average for FY 24 through FY 33, the associated excluded debt service would result in an average property tax increase of approximately $258 per year, 2.6%, for the median assessed property value of $739.
Is that just median residential?
Well, no, it's median property, and you're right, like
That's what I said.
it's on Michelle's slides, so it mirrors those numbers.
The median residential is lower for single houses in Concord.
Yeah, I think it's okay though. I mean, it's just a reference point. I mean, fundamentally, I don't know, it would be on everybody's numbers different anyway. Right, so yeah, just in terms of how it's presented, I think it's okay.
That's the right number, yes.
Yeah, that's good. So other than that, I'm welcome, obviously, we'll entertain more, but that's all
Set
we
of property.
received.
Yes, the property, not noted. Okay, I'm sorry.
You didn't know they.
I thought it was good. I thought you beefed up the parts that we talked about meeting, and I thought that the chronology in a sense was much better. So I thought it was fine.
Questions, comments, edits?
Not so great.
This is true.
I thought maybe helpful as sort of a summary point in terms of the cost. This is really addressing solving or addressing three challenges.
Correct.
North Fire Station, the police
headquarters,
and the rec center town hall, or no, I mean, senior center town hall. That sort of, if there's some way to make that clear, just highlight, again, it's not just.
Except we don't have any specific say about the needs of the.
Just that it's, well, that's true, I mean, but it's part of, it's not just relocating the fire station.
Oh, no, but it does, there's a whole paragraph in here, I'll have to find it, about the senior center.
This project also affects the needs of the senior center.
You just want to pull it up front.
I do, if my personal suggestion, take or leave it, is the one, either at the beginning or the conclusion.
It's on page 2 now. Are you looking at the right version? I think it did get pulled up.
Oh, did it?
So on page 2, there's for identification of the site, the town has several initiatives to address the needs of key municipal departments of their population.
Okay.
Has grown and changed, blah, 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 the fire department, the police department, and the senior center. Oh, no, you're right, the other paragraph is down.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The project also affects.
it is on page 5, you're right.
It's probably.
Everybody keeps on moving everything up and then all the other stuff keeps moving down.
On the deck on me. So eventually some paragraph has.
So maybe, so the point is, I guess you're making my point, it's in there, but not, I think the hammer either as an intro or a conclusion. We're addressing, we're not solving, we're addressing.
That Joe will mention it. But yes, I will see if I can move it up.
You could just add another sentence there about this would solve all three of these problems and then start that the north of our station.
Okay.
Solve the senior center for that.
Addresses, or addresses, yeah, whatever.
Does anybody know why, Rec is not moving to the new facility? No,
Why would it?
because that's where the functions, the function of departments will be located.
I think the whole infrastructure is here with, and the technology is here.
And all they're doing is do that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they're not. They're not even in the same town as for the town that they.
No, I understand all of that, but I kept in the back of my mind that somebody said that when they did renovations, that they had to squeeze some stuff in, that they don't quite have the space that they need.
We can add other towns.
I beg your pardon?
We can add other towns.
I can't hear you.
We can add other towns to Shrek.
No. This is,
Shrek was carved out, I think what you.
no, I'm talking about the physical space.
No, I know, I'm here, so I think I'm answering your question, tell me if I'm not. When Shrek was built, when Shrek was put into town hall, it took 1,500 square feet from what was the police department administrative space, is that what you're thinking?
Yes, does Shrek have enough physical space
Yes.
in town hall?
Andy, I think what Sue is saying is they have sufficient space and capacity right now to add another town into the construction.
All right, okay, so I'm misremembering what we heard about the.
Now, they took space away from the police department.
No, I understand that, but for some reason they redoing a closet, so it's stuck in the back of my mind, maybe it was a chance.
That might have been
That was not IT.
I think that was IT.
That's our IT business. But there's these, yeah. Okay. All right, further comments, questions? Any comments from anyone from members of the public who are watching us?
Or is that our Sarah?
All right, seeing none.
Yeah.
You have some edits to make? Few? Well, put the pressure on Al. He's already made it.
Your editor likes that.
To be send them to you before.
In this case.
Oh, yes.
Well, when we come to-
Take it back, take it back.
Actually, when we come to housekeeping, maybe for tonight, something better.
They're a little out of order from what we normally do.
I have a process in mind.
Okay, then let us move on to Brenda at Article C.
Caitlin and Joe.
And
IT. So I think in the message I sent out, when I sent this out, I said that the wording about the need for the fund to be described as having potential multiple uses. In although the town intends to use it for tax mitigation, that the fund needs to be created in a way and be used for other things in order to deal with this IRS regulation about seeking funds. Apparently. So that language has Rick Manley has given us a lot of help in terms of writing that, and we've used that language in here. Everything else we are open to feedback on, and we will ultimately run the final version, whatever input we get tonight, by Rick again to make sure that we haven't managed to cross those different lines. But anyway, so just to understand, that was the intent of that message, to say this stuff we got directly from the two lawyers, and the rest we added as things that we think people at town meeting will want to know, but we obviously want your feedback about what you think people at town meeting will want to know. So
But can I, at least my understanding of that conversation, that email from Rick, is that he said not only the language as it refers to the IRS regulations, but the language that was in that draft as it was constructed was okay by him.
This is another version, yes.
The most recent version that has been sent out, so.
No, not to the committee, but sent to.
The one that you and I talked about over the weekend, and then you sent out to your group.
Mhm.
And they rearranged a couple of paragraphs and things. So there's a framework of the document. I don't want to give the group the impression that we can start from scratch and build something. We have a very definite
Unless people
framework.
say, this makes no sense at all, then we will have to start from scratch, but we're hoping that that's not the case. So,
Well, we have a legal opinion on the document, so I think,
we should go with
I
that.
think we're starting. We're gonna get an unbiased opinion here, Dave.
It's always good to follow your lawyer's advice.
You need to say what we're on.
So, and I think we are.
Was it my humble, we get comments on Rick's, like the latest one, like, or was it the one that I sent like a couple weeks ago?
George, when I sent you an email about what George was asking us to make changes
Yes,
on,
that one.
so that's the version that you guys saw, and then, and we worked on when we worked together
Yeah,
tonight about it, and that's the version that went to Rick Manley, because I knew we needed his help with how to describe this fund.
So this is what he.
The description of how the fund would be used.
Right.
He's approved, yes, exactly. So,
Can I ask a question, and it's an absolute nit, but I'm just it just is intriguing to me. Is there really a reason that you do 2/3? Really?
We don't usually do that.
And it's distracting to me reading, but I didn't know if there was a reason that you did it.
I hadn't, this is one of the things I hadn't looked up in the style manual, so.
It made me clear to other people. I didn't know if there was a reason.
It comes from the first meeting with John Coughlin, where he went over, these are the decisions that would require 2/3, these are the decisions that require majority. Blah, 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 blah.
Yeah,
It's like,
we
I'm
usually
down,
write it.
it's not part of my head,
Yeah.
so, but okay, yes, no, 2/3 will disappear, so it'll say 2/3.
And I thought it did a good job of explaining.
Oh, I
On everything.
excellent.
Yeah.
No, I think it's excellent.
Yeah.
I had a question on the last sentence of the first paragraph under comment, particularly the end of it that says. Future town meetings can be used to avoid raising taxes to pay the debt service. Should that, maybe it's nitpicky, but should it be like offset tax increases or to mitigate tax increases? Because the 7 million won't avoid tax increases, it just lessens the impact of the tax increase over the first few years.
Where are you looking? Lindsay?
First
Sorry.
paragraph.
The last sentence of the first paragraph under comment.
Well, it's an offset if you raise it and then there's a reduction, right? Like if this means that you don't have to raise as much taxes because of the.
I mean, you either don't have to raise them as much, or you're
Right.
offsetting the increase, or you're doing something, but you're not actually going to be able to use it to avoid raising taxes.
Yeah,
Full
okay.
stop.
Yeah, no,
You're reducing the tax.
You're reducing the taxes.
yeah.
So to reduce.
Right.
The increase. Yeah.
Reduce tax increases, potential tax,
Yeah.
Reduce,
potential tax increases.
not potentially, no. But reduce. Reduce to reduce.
Just to mitigate
To mitigate.
anticipated tax increase.
Yeah.
Great, okay, so that. Okay, so this is. I mean, I know that's the issue. Other things that are not clear, other things you think people want to know about?
No, I thought it went well.
The only part
Considering
that,
the legalese.
yeah, I was gonna just say, Jason, that the only part that you kind of had to read twice was the part that you knew the lawyers wrote.
That's why you need lawyers.
I don't like that any day. I know, because it was kind of, and people, no, but I know, but then everybody's always like. eh. Definition.
That's better than soft ones.
That, yeah. Could be worse, could be worse. Or, no, my absolute least favorite is free money.
Yes.
Free cash.
Free cash.
Yeah, like nails on a chalkboard.
Unfortunately, that's the
Yeah.
It's used a
The
lot.
purpose is to help people understand what fund we're talking about.
Yeah,
If you have a person in town.
It is
brings them
closely
up.
involved.
Right, so it's just meant to get. We use unassigned fund balance, but that's a peculiar name to be quite truthful. Any layperson reading it. is like, well,
There it is.
that's the purpose, so.
Well, I think that's why it was so understandable, actually, because we talked about it the way people there.
One of the questions that Carol emailed us is, since we say that currently the unassigned fund balance exceeds 20%, should we refer to what the unassigned fund balance will look like after this transfer? That we will still be above 20%. And the information that Sue gave me is that the audit's not complete, so the exact reportable number of that, how big unassigned fund balance will be, is not known yet. But Sue, therefore, I believe, says we will be still above 20% at the end of this. Is that something that people feel should be said? Do you think it's okay?
Conjecture at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's adding.
So even after the appropriation,
Even after the 7 million gets transferred.
we still will be above 20%.
Yeah, because we're significantly above.
7 million is from 6/30/21.
Hmm.
6/30/22, unassigned fund balance hasn't been determined yet.
And the idea was that there's 2 million that gets used for other things, right?
Yes.
And if it was.
Oh, I'm
couldn't we
sorry,
then-
pre-appropriation.
Right.
So then couldn't we in April, if we so pleased, move more into, so, I mean,
Yeah.
Anytime you need.
yeah,
I just think when I asked, I guess I thought it was helpful to not say this is bringing the stabilization fund down to 6%. You know, I get what I'm about whether it might be over 20. But it's just how, my question in reading it was. How far down does this bring it?
Well, that's why.
So are we
said
giving up
7
all of our cushion?
7 million was the number, it was actually 12 million above the 20%.
So could we, does it add any value to add that, or, you know, to just say. As of the prior year?
Because someone's gonna come up and say, well, what happens this year?
No, that's
Why don't you
fine.
put in more of that?
It's just my question, you know, if I were sitting there, that would be my question, is what is it? What does it do to this stabilization fund, especially in light of the comment that's saying, and now the town's committed to using the money here, and I know we can vote it back, and I'm not suggesting we expand on that more. But, you know, those are the two things that I was reading is committed this money, and I don't know what it's done for my cushion for other things.
The reason why the 7 million was, is because the 7 million was above the 20% last year.
So you get to the second.
Even if we take the 7 million, we will still be above.
Oh, somebody asked, get that answer. I was pleased to get that information because I feel like.
Because Brenda's gonna have to say that.
I could vote for that, but I with conviction.
Yeah.
Well, what gets us to 18%? And then a motion to amend for that number.
Yes, that is possible.
but we don't, we won't, the books won't be done yet,
No.
so it's all conjecture.
No, but at least you can say, we'll look at it in April. I think
Yeah.
your point was that I think it's fully available at some point.
So I guess my question, Brenda, is whether we need to go into an explanation on the fund balance within the financial policy. Whether that section could be left out, or whether people feel that we need to go to explaining what our policy is there.
I think you need to explain that there is a policy.
Hmm.
And, you know, giving the details of it is just kind of adding to that explanation, but I think, you know, someone attending town meeting or getting the warrant, say, first time residents of the town, and they read about this, unassigned funds. The first question I think anyone would have is, how do you, is it unassigned and uncontrolled? So putting something in there that says there are definitive boundaries. And all of this is within those boundaries, I think makes a lot of sense.
Would you put in anything more? I mean, I think. If the way I read the third paragraph, that's exactly what it says. Is there more that you would add there?
I think
No, I
I'm starting to suggest.
Yeah, what I would suggest,
Oh, no, I would just.
so what,
thinking just-
so what I was. Or at least asking, is that you make the initial statement in that paragraph. Is that the use of a stabilization fund is consistent with the town's financial policy? And whether that is sufficient or whether it's necessary to broaden that and explain what that policy is. Now, I can see the point that you're making, Joe, that not everybody is aware, and some people may say, okay, what is the policy?
I think 50% don't want to know more, and 50% do want to know more.
The only thing, you're saying take them down? He's saying.
Yeah.
You know, I think.
Question whether you need to go into the town.
Oh,
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Do we need to say the town should maintain unassigned?
Okay, I think what's good about it.
I'm just asking the
Yeah.
question.
I think what's good about it, apart from what Joe just said, it also reminds the voters at town meeting that we actually have a financial policy. And it actually says certain things and we try to abide by it. Because remember, we got the people at some point over the last 4 years. We've had lots of people say, why do you have that? You don't, why do you need all that? Why isn't 10% enough? Why isn't 5% enough? Why don't we use, you know? So I think that reminder is.
Well, I
It's
think,
useful.
I think people are aware that we have a financial policy because we refer to it constantly. But, you know, this does spell it out in detail of how we calculate the free cash. And
And I think that
at
makes.
least, no question about it, so.
Yeah.
The only thing when you were just the first sentence, the only thing that didn't make sense to me was like, to me, the financial policy says that we can use those funds. For like capital expenditures, and it doesn't say we use those funds for stabilization, the creation of stabilization fund. So I wasn't following that sentence all the way through from like pulling the money to pay for. Maybe I'm not like connecting the dots here, but I wasn't following that, like where
these
our
are
large
large
fund is, but you're creating a stabilization fund, I guess.
Mitigate the property tax increases on the large capital project.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. When I think of like the way that I read the sentence, I read about taking the money, just paying for the capital expenditure where we're paying the debt service line. With the, I don't know. For what-
I had the same first reaction to
Okay,
it.
thank
It's
you.
different because it's different than putting $7 million toward the building.
But the capital projects becomes important for the legality of the stabilization.
No, but I just don't, when I read the financial policy and I read it just like for the words, it doesn't say. That we can use the money to create a stabilization fund, and I get that it's like, it's a flow, I just wasn't connecting the dots between. The stabilization fund versus the actual capital purchase.
But isn't it? I'm gonna use the wrong term here, but it's almost like appropriating the money, right? I mean, it's definitively saying what you're gonna do with the money, so it's no longer free cash. It's now assigned.
Not unassigned fund.
It's not unassigned.
It's now assigned fund.
Basically, what you're doing is reserve.
I was gonna say,
But we're putting it into a stabilization fund. You're adding the step from financial policy. And that's your.
Yeah,
It's not strictly from the financial policy. There's an
Right.
added.
yeah, so
But
yeah,
it's targeted tax
Yeah.
relief, which is part of the
Right.
policy. So. But if
I
there's
think it gets-
confusion, do we take it out or?
No, I think,
Well,
I
is
think
it-
that it's fine in there, I just didn't, when it's standalone, I was like, that's where I was having confusion. If we
Oh,
only said-
So I'm adding the extra language sort of beefs it up and provides clarity.
That's fine.
At this point, or, let's say Article C passes, money goes in, it passes and it gets established. You've really only allocated the money to that. Haven't expended it at all.
Good.
And that it transitions from being allocated to actually going to be used on the 2/3 vote of the town meeting.
So can I just ask, because I hadn't read it this way before, but so is this a capital project cost and a debt service stabilization fund, or is this a capital project cost and debt service stabilization fund? Like, I think that makes, right, I'm just saying, I read this to say that this was a fund that was for capital project costs and debt service stabilization. To which I would say then you would amend you wouldn't call it the stabilization fund down in that fourth paragraph. You would have to say the use of the fund, of this fund to mitigate property tax increases or whatnot. So I
think that's what,
But isn't the technical term of a stabilization fund? Don't you have to create a stabilization fund pursuant to the state statutes refer to?
It's a
Stabilization fund.
stabilization fund. But for the name of it, it's not going to-
Right. So
it is a.
it is a stabilization fund.
Got it.
That's what the general law specifies. And because of the IRS thing, we get listed as capital project cost and debt service.
Yeah.
To be used for either.
So it's a stabilization fund
That
that
is
is for
has
capital
this.
project costs and debt service.
And any other legal purpose. So I cannot change the wording of Article C statement, which says that this would be used to issue for bonds issued to new public safety facility and or the new Foster Elementary. Can't change that one, right? Because that's. But I can change it in the recommended motion. Correct. That we can call in, that would be issued for the new public safety facility and or the new elementary school to replace Foster. That's the way, we can make that change. John Coughlin has to review.
We would have to review it with John, but I think for Article C, we could change that language because it's not substantive language.
And we've recommended something that's slightly different from what the article is going to be addressed. Yeah.
But one of them, they told us not to change the article. I don't remember why. They told us not to change the article, but we were allowed to change it in the recommended motion.
Correct. I don't think we could ever change the article unless they open warrant. But
Right. No, that's what I'm saying, but we should change in the motion.
Yeah.
I'm just alerting people. You'll see one in the article, it will be described as the Foster school, the new Foster school, and then in the recommended motion, it will be the new elementary school. Replacement.
They should have figured out their PR campaign before they.
Before they wrote the article. But they should have told John Coughlin about it. Because he's the one who wrote the article.
Hey,
So
this
other
one-
comments, input?
Think we're good.
Great, we've got a
All right, thank you.
revised version out.
Are there any comments from the public? If there are, please raise your hand.
You're drifting off.
Not seeing any, then we would consider the matter closed and move on. All right. So next item on our agenda is liaison reports. And do we have it?
I have a couple, actually. So first, just a report from the Strategic Budget Task Force that's met, I think 2 times since we last reported. So just a couple of things. One, the task force is revisiting pilot agreements payment in lieu of taxes and thinking, and that was one of the recommendations in the report, started thinking about looking at other towns and how do they do pilots. And whether there might be some proposal in the spring to get related to that. Second, there's also a discussion of the future of the task force, since it issued the report last year. And so now the discussion is kind of what is the task force for? Is it to continue to research things and make recommendations, or is it supposed to be more involved in implementation, which I think the general consensus was it wasn't. It was to sort of hand things off to others. And then finally, the other thing I thought people might be interested in, there is an ongoing review of town-owned real estate. That's either vacant or not being used, and the focus is really on 15 parcels of property that have a value of more, that each have a value of at least $50,000. And the total value of those properties would be about $13 million. Some of them are probably useless properties, which is to say they're not buildable, they're not developable, but they're just there. So anyway, so I thought those were things that we would be interested in. And we did have the last meeting, we did get this report from the school on their staff audit. And so I know Nancy shared that with us. So that's that one.
Is the North Fire Station on the property list?
I don't believe it is yet, because right now it is not a vacant, it's not a vacant property. It is being used.
Hingham was already.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's being used as a fire station. So this is looking at things that are not being used.
If we're gonna start divvying up useless property, let's talk about the tree barn.
Well, speaking of the tree barn, so my other liaison report is CPC met recently, and so I just wanted to update people in terms of that. So CPC received 17 applications in the preliminary round, which is a lot more than recent years, as I recall. And so this first meeting they had was to vote on the eligibility of these projects just based on what is stated on the one-page application and the statute. And one of the things I think the committee did that was particularly useful is John Coughlin was there to help. And it seemed like from past years, this might have been a big improvement to help sort of vet what was appropriate. So after much discussion of the 17 applications, 8 were about community housing, 5 were about historic preservation, and 4 were about recreation. None were actually about open space. In terms of those, 1 was rejected as not being eligible, and that was a proposal for a new sign at Baxter Street, and that doesn't meet the statutory requirement. Several of the housing authority requests had questions that had to be further developed, but at the moment they are eligible on their face. Whether they're ultimately eligible will be decided. In the historic preservations, 2 of those were for from private property owners, and CPC funds can be used for private property, but they have to have a public purpose. And so there was questions about whether there was in fact public purpose for those. So at this point, the liaisons to those various projects are to meet and help the person who's trying to get the project finally approved, to process that and answer questions, many of which were raised. The final applications are due October 11th, and they will vote on moving them forward. At least the hope is, I think, from their vote on moving them forward, which as near as I can understand is really just saying these are eligible projects, and that will be on October 12th. A big day, it appears.
Big, lot of things. Is this, do you know how much money?
They did not report on how much money they have at this point, so do not, and I think, Joe and Nancy, I think were there, maybe somebody, so. It was, I have to say, having watched some of CPC meetings in recent years, as you might know, Julie Straley is the new chair of CPC, a very different meeting.
I can tell you, that, just to answer your question, Rich, they didn't say how much money they have, but there's over $3.8 million in ads. I'm pretty sure that I don't have.
Yeah, no, there's gonna be some.
What determines how much money they have? Then it's 1.5 of our taxes.
1.5%.
Yeah.
And there's some state matching. Which is, there is a formula, and I forget what it
It used to
is.
be like 50, it used to be, and it keeps going down and down, yeah. Down.
Did you spend that appropriation annually?
Yes.
It is. And there's a requirement for how it is spent. 10%.
10% in community housing, 10%, historic, and 10% on open space and recreation.
Yeah,
But our open space will be covered by the debt payment that we're still paying on the landlord. The property behind Main Street.
Pleasant Street, on Pleasant Street, no.
The entrance is on Pleasant Street, but it runs behind Main Street. Yeah.
So we will
Nice piece of property.
Gonna not backyard.
So we'll keep you informed as this project, for those people who are new, obviously, whatever projects they recommend and we recommend to town meeting then become part of the warrant article, so. Usually it's big different, very long, complicated, yes.
Other liaison reports.
Hingham Light Board, we know that Jack Ryan resigned before the end of his term, and Tyler Harrell has been appointed as the third member of the Light Board until the next election. He seems to have quite a bit to contribute, 20 years of experience in the energy world. I see the other two Light Board members asking questions of him, so he's bringing knowledge of sort of the more of the industry investment side. So this is better.
What's his name?
Tyler Harold. I assume he will be running for election at the next election. And they are doing two things right now. They're working very hard on revising their rebate programs to encourage people to first and foremost do insulation work on their houses, because that's the single most effective thing people can do to reduce their carbon footprint, is to insulate so they're not heating the world, but encouraging people to do that. And then rebates for solar panels, for heat pumps, et cetera, et cetera. So they're vamping those up and increasing the amounts. The other thing that they're looking at is that other towns have come up with a plan for basically an opt-out program for ratepayers to put money into a fund for the town to use for more of these kinds of green projects. So some towns like Wellesley have 4% of your of the electric bill sort of add-on that goes into that fund, but it's set up so that any person who wants to opt out of it can do that. But it's sort of great. So they're thinking about bringing their article along those lines to town meeting. They're not really, they're still meeting with people to sort of find out more about it, but that's one of the things they're thinking about in order to be able to increase the investment from the light plant and making energy changes to have it.
Do you mean they would potentially raise your rates by 4% and then you would have the option to opt out?
Yes, right. That's how it's set up. Yeah. And it has worked effectively in towns that to set aside a big chunk of money. So,
Just curious, did they, when they were talking about, encouraging individuals to do, insulation, whatever, conservation, did they talk at all about the new tax credits, federal tax credits, and they're including that?
yeah, I mean, they're trying to, the light plant now has, your first name is Brianna, her last name I've forgotten, that she is their sustainability coordinator. Yes, so she's putting creative things together about it. So she's been putting together a very powerful campaign to get a lot of information out. And yes, they're combining all these different things, to make it easier. And for each of their meetings, there are homeowners listening in to see how the rebate programs are shifting in ways that they are going to be hopefully excited about. So that's great. So they seem to be developing some buzz, which is good. I guess.
And then,
Good. Climate action plan.
oh, no, I know the light plant had a open house.
Oh, yes,
last
right.
week.
They have taken the proposal for their third transmission line on the road. They've taken it to Weymouth. They've had two different meetings, I believe, in Weymouth with Weymouth residents. And then they had an open house last night for anybody from Weymouth or from Hingham to come and see the details of the plan of where this third transmission line would come in. The idea, for those of you who weren't here last year, Hingham's currently served by two power lines. They are on the same poles. They come in on the same route. That pole is along the Greenway, and if that Greenbush Railway, if a train knocks one of those out, the town is black for a very long period of time. So the idea here, given climate change, given the kinds of things that are happening around the world, is to put in a third transmission line that will be underground. And will bring, another source of power. It is the amount of power the town will eventually need for all the electrification. It's going to be in process hopefully for the next many years, but not needed immediately, but the protection for reliability is needed as soon as it can happen. So we have put together, the warrant article last year was to transfer a chunk of land on the northeast corner of the transfer station that is not currently being used by the transfer station to the to the control of the light plant, so that would be the site where this the third line would come in. There'd be another distribution center built there. So anyway, so a location was found. The town agreed to transfer the land to the light plant, so which the land like needed in order to begin what is a 2-year permitting process with the state's energy board. So they are beginning that process. They're reaching out to Weymouth residents and Hingham residents to explain the project. As part of that, there's a lot on the website. If you haven't seen the designs, but basically it would be an underground line coming from Weymouth. So the bigger destruction, unfortunately, is in Weymouth, because it's going to have to come along streets. So we'll be digging up the streets to put the line in, and then it will come into the Hobart area, obviously, because it'll be the transfer station. It will be set up so that if one of the other lines goes down, this one can feed the rest of the town. So it's meant to create reliability. Good.
Brother, do you know, is the line coming from the same like transfer station that the underground thing is? Like, if the power goes out in Weymouth,
If National Grid's big distribution goes down, yes, this whole part of eastern Massachusetts will go down. However, National Grid has sort of multiple connectors. So, and there are different ways that the Weymouth section gets fed.
Okay.
So it would take a lot of things going down
yeah.
for the whole town to go away.
That's how we take
Yeah, it is absolutely possible, but
Yeah.
This is,
So-
when Hingham did the 2 lines, that was the standard for reliability.
Yeah.
Back when those were built 40 or 50 years ago, but the standard for reliability, given what's happening with climate storms these days, is higher. And we need to get there, so. So the answer is yes, the tap will come in from the same National Grid system, but in a slightly different place behind the skating.
so it truly is like a different source,
Slightly.
So will the
Kind
power,
like a little bit.
will the power company be coming to town for appropriations to pay for all that, or is that already?
The light plant will be coming to the town to have the town get the debt for it, but the repayment is from the ratepayers.
Yeah, of course. Is that a this year thing? No. Okay.
No, the
So-
2-year permitting process is gonna.
So it won't be till the end of the permitting process.
Pretty close to that.
Oh, no, I'm like, that's very nice. I'm not going on.
I believe it will not be, it will be for next year's town meeting, I believe it'll be for 2024. But it's coming.
They're just like, not on my watch.
Don't
I have enough?
That changes a little, that's what it's looking like as I hear the conversation.
I think that's on the order of public safety building costs.
I would imagine, yeah.
Yeah, it's in
That was 2 years.
65, yes, 65, I think. But it's the right player.
Yeah.
And the light plan is already set aside 13 million to pay for part of this. So they've had their own savings. This is their own, they are an enterprise company. But apparently the pilot for them will change. All right, climate action plan committee, sorry, that group did their virtual engagement session with the town, had about 35 participants, which is better than their first one. fairly, very constructive conversation, and basically where they are at this point is ready to go to meet with the select board in a couple of weeks. They're hoping to meet with them in the week of October 10th, to kind of describe the pieces that they expect will go into the plan, get the select board feedback, and then write up their proposed sort of it's a climate action plan, it's not a policy, so it's a climate action series of steps that can be taken. And they will then be taking the next piece of public information by presenting in probably early December, some ideas that they have. It's not clear yet which pieces, if any, they're planning to put into warrant articles for next spring's town meeting. There are pieces that could become warrant articles, there are other things that simply the town administration could adopt. Okay.
At an audit committee meeting, and it was just an update on where the status of the town audit is. It's on track. There was no major news with it, you know, what was outstanding, and they're on track to deliver in mid-December, which is the same as last year.
All right.
You want to add to that? Because you're gonna do it next meeting.
We are gonna do it next.
I don't know if I can talk about it.
It's not really on the agenda. It's
So.
intended for next. So
Who's that?
we'll have a reserve fund transfer. Oh, you're excited.
Late summer.
Yeah.
Save it for when
Joe, do you have a comment or something?
No.
Thought I sort of had. Okay, so just a couple of things from my standpoint. And I did watch, I know Nancy, you're on the line as well, and I think Brenda, you joined us. So last night, the foster group went before both planning board and conservation. And they did not get approval, and I know they were not looking for approval. But they have attended the meetings to, they have more work to do. And so the next meeting is going to be on October 12th, which is going to be after we vote, after the select board votes. Conservation is hoping to vote on the 12th. I'm not going to guarantee it, but they are hoping that all of their questions will be answered. And they will be in a position where they can vote. Planning board is also meeting on the 12th with Foster, and they will not vote on the 12th. And they, as Ray said, they were initially looking to hold their approval vote or their rejection vote, whatever the vote is going to be, until November. But Ray pointed out the meeting, special town meeting is November 1st, and we'd really like to have the projects permitted by then. So they agreed to vote no later than the 31st of October. And so that means that we will vote without the approval on Foster for conservation and planning. But the state building has already been permitted. And select board will vote without those approvals. So I think what we're going to need to do on our comment, and I know you've been making changes, but I think somewhere in our comment, we're going to have to add a line or two that says basically that permitting is still underway on these projects. And is expected to be finished by town meeting day.
We reported on the town meeting.
Reported on, and the AdCom, depending on what comes out of these boards, there's the possibility we would either revote or would have to change our comment. And that would have to come out in a supplement on November 1st. So a little bit of ambiguous wiggle wording to go in there. And I'll think of some things and send them over to you, but just, if for some unknown reason planning board will come out to say no, then you may have to
What did you, but isn't the project dead if they say no?
I don't know. I don't know what they would say, whether they would require a change. I can't imagine they would say no, so let me say that, but whether they would require a change or something, I don't know what they would do. Conservation is the more important one, but they will be done by the 12th, so if they do say something, then we need to change our comment.
So could the comment just say something like the permitting process with conservation, the planning board is ongoing at the time of this comment is being written. More information will be given at time,
If necessary.
if necessary, yeah, I mean that.
It strikes me that's in conflict with the getting in details of the process comment that I received. And also adding complication. Adding complication to something that doesn't impact
It does.
whether we,
It does, but if you think
it
about
doesn't
it,
impact whether we think the project's a good idea.
well. No, it doesn't affect whether we think it's a good project or not, but if you think about it, if for some reason this project is not permitted by conservation, then they're not gonna be able to build in there. Right? So, in my mind, I'm still sort of going through it. But I'm thinking some language in there that would give us the opportunity to revote and update our comment, whatever it is.
I think that's smart because we want to recommend borrowing for unbuildable buildings.
Can I play devil's advocate just a little bit? I think that those are important things that we would say at town meeting. But I went through the comment for the middle school wasn't permitted when we borrowed the money.
Right.
And we never referenced that.
Right.
In the article.
Right.
So.
I understand that, and I understand that it's been practiced. What throws me is the location of the school.
Right, it's much more controversial.
I mean, it's much more controversial.
So, but what if we didn't say anything in the comment that we're submitting right now? But if in fact there are changes, we could still have a supplemental. I mean, we could revote and have a supplemental comment recommendation at town meeting.
Absolutely.
And so then we haven't raised any issues before they come, but we could raise them. then.
We're recommending the projects as presented.
That's it, precinct.
Right, and so fundamentally, if the planning board or the conservation commission alters what has been presented to us, then I think we certainly would reserve the right to issue a supplement that would say we no longer agree or whatever the case may be. Right.
And we have certainly met the morning of town meeting and voted something that we, as I recall.
I mean, I didn't obviously watch or go, but planning board, is there something specific that they're concerned about, or is it not that clear?
They don't like some of the retaining walls.
Yeah, I think both groups have moved beyond the actual physical building itself.
Yeah.
And sort of
The
history with
structure
some of
stuff,
the,
yeah.
there's an outdoor classroom
Right.
that extends down into the wetlands and affords the opportunity for science teachers or whatever to go out and show the class, wetlands and how it operates. That's what. And there are some retaining walls, and some streetscape kind of issues. Legitimate issues.
Yeah.
Simply need to be talked through and discussed. But as far as the actual.
Worried about the back, planning board's worried about. Nobody's talking about the building anymore.
So the building was certainly a source of discussion.
Yeah.
But it seems to have moved beyond it. So maybe that's part of the process, fine tuning and getting down to yes.
Yeah.
Is to go through all of these issues, big ones, and then get down to some of the smaller ones. Well, I appreciate the comments. A work in progress. And so we will vote. So, point to David Lean raised the bit ago, we will vote on the sixth. Select board will vote on the sixth. So we'll vote on the comments, the recommended vote, and the articles on the sixth. And all of that information then needs to go to the printer at the end of the day on the seventh. Which means that.
I like this to be ending,
This is the great thing about deadlines.
That is,
particularly when you're the editor. Yeah.
so the way the process works for warrant articles is that they get drafted. And they go to an editor. And in the past, we've had, Evelyn has been an editor for several years, Nancy was an editor, Tina was an editor. And I need to get another editor this year, so raise hand if you're interested. But the editor will then make sure it complies with the style guidelines, and it has to go out for legal review.
And George's review.
And my review. So all of that is gonna take place
Yeah, so
Friday morning, and
Yes.
hopefully Dave Lane will be able to take two of these comments, which are pretty close to being finalized, work through all of the issues there, send them to Dave for a final look at, and so we'll really be down to just the one article.
Yeah, so my thinking was on this, that I would, when you have the final version for us to look at on the sixth, if you send that to me, I will go ahead and do my edits. I won't give it back to you, I'll just hold those edits. And then after we vote, so at the meeting, if there's anything that's different, my view was I would just add it. So unless you felt the need to go back and change anything, I would just do that, and then at the end of the meeting, I'll go home and finish that and send it to George. And I'll do the same thing with Foster to the extent, I think Foster may be harder. So I've reminded myself that when we did the water company, I had all the water company articles to edit. And I had, because of different members of the committee who wanted to have a voice in the comments. They had to be they had to go, I think, I guess it would have been to Donna on Friday morning. To go to the selectman's office. So I stayed up all night Thursday night doing the 4 warrant articles. So I'm sort of figuring it could be late because we have a lot that's still done on Foster,
But now, Brenda, the Article C has already been through legal review. Can you send Article B through legal review?
well, once they go to the process, as I understand, is when George submits them to the town administrator's office, they then go to John Coughlin for review.
No, I'm just saying, can we get ahead of that? Can we send it to John before it gets voted on?
If we've agreed that this is the final version, I think we could.
I mean, we've already done that in essence for.
We've done it with Rick Manley, I saw it early, and I know he gets to see it one more time, but I can send it.
Yeah, I'll send it to you tomorrow, but I think the more you get ahead of that, the better.
Well, yeah.
Okay, the other thing that I wanted to bring up was. So Nancy forwarded me an email that she gets from the Mass Municipal Association. Which I will forward to everybody here. So every year, the MMA puts on a seminar, a day-long meeting, all towns within Massachusetts are invited to attend. I have attended in the past, and Nancy has attended. Other people may have attended. It's an opportunity to meet board members, finance board members from other communities. There are always presentations about how different communities do different things. Issues get brought up, get discussed. It's a very interesting meeting. There is a $55 cost to go, and the town will reimburse anybody who wants to attend that. That meeting is November the 5th, and I will send forward. Note Nancy will forward it as we sit there. if she would like.
No, I was gonna say it's the Association of Town Finance Committees.
Yeah, they've been on Zoom the last couple
Yeah,
of
and
years.
it's in Sharon, so not that far a ride. But,
That's the Saturday before the election.
before the elections, that's right. Saturday after.
People might be holding signs somewhere. For making phone calls.
I have no other housekeeping items. Does anybody have anything? Any matters within the last 48 hours? Have anything that we haven't discussed? Anybody else? Then I will accept the motion.
So moved. Or second, whatever.
Be the first and the second, guys.
Motion to adjourn.
Second. Point at me, I will respond.
Is Sarah still on? She's gone.
Was that our Sarah? The babies look too young.
Was it outside?
That's what I was thinking.
Oh.
I think she would have said if it was her.
I don't think so, yeah,
Yeah. I would be surprised.
yeah, so, right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?